Welcome to the Data Product Management in Action podcast, created and executive produced by me, Scott Hurlman, and brought to you by Soda, your best friend in data quality and contracts tooling. We created this podcast to serve as a place for actual practitioners bringing product management practices to data, whether that is to AI and ML, data products, platforms, or everything else in data, right? And it's to dig into the nitty-gritty of product management in data, but in fun and dynamic conversations. It's not just lift and shift from software product management. We have a great set of hosts for you that are also practitioners, so they can really get into those specifics and dive deep and get you the information you want to know rather than just high level, here is what a data product is. This is about cutting through the noise of data product management to drive towards actionable insights, hence the actual podcast name, Data Product Management in Action. So sit back and enjoy another awesome conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Data Product Management in Action podcast. I'm your host, Frannie Helforoush, and today we are going to have a very interesting episode with Soheil Mirchi. Soheil is a technical product manager and manages a data platform as well as implementing data products, introducing data mesh in his company, and much more. I will let him introduce himself and get to the whole story. Quick disclaimer that Soheil is representing his own view and is not representing the views of his company. Welcome to the podcast, Soheil.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm Soheil. As you also mentioned, I'm a technical product manager at Temedica, and we are a health insight company at Temedica, which basically means that we work with the healthcare and pharmaceutical data, trying to turn the complex data sets into some meaningful insights for our clients, which are mainly include the pharmaceutical companies and other healthcare entities in the ecosystem.
Great. Thank you so much. So I heard, like you told me before, that you transitioned to data mesh, or actually helped the whole company transition to data mesh concept. So how was that transitioning, working with specifically your role? And what was it about that about the data mesh helps you overcome the challenges with the data platform and everything that you were doing before?
Mm-hmm. Well, I joined the company about a little bit more than 2 years, very close to 3 years now. And when I joined, we were a very small team in the data team, and the data sources that we had were also quite small. But then the decision was already made that they wanted to move the whole cloud provider from AWS to the GCP. And this basically gave us the opportunity to not only migrate to another cloud provider, but also rethink everything that was already done before us. And then we were trying to build on top of it. And that led us into doing a little bit of investigation, doing some research to see what other kind of architecture we can use. And it was, again, at a time that I think data mesh was quite hyped at the moment. I think it was 2023. So it was beginning of 2023. And that was basically the starting point of saying, okay, let's change the whole architecture. Let's move away from this centralized data lake that we have to a more of decentralized architecture that also gives us the possibility to grow. So rather than being this small data team that handles everything, so we knew that the company is growing very much, and then we wanted something that is actually more flexible, more scalable, and then it can actually be handled with multiple data sources. So I think that was when everything started. And that was actually when the data platform team was kind of formed too. And I, as the kind of the lead of the data platform team, because as I mentioned in the beginning, it was just one data team doing everything from interacting with the end customer to improving the data platform, the ingestion, validation, everything. But then we changed this with the data mesh. So that also, like the idea of data mesh kind of helped in that sense as well to define domain teams in a sense. So we define domain teams based on business needs. We multiplied divided the data experts into multiple teams. One was more technical, then they defined it as a data platform to only develop the platform to make sure that they can actually introduce data products. And then the others, they're more of a customer facing, understanding the business needs, understanding the customer so that they can actually, in the future, near future, basically own the data products. Because again, at the very beginning, we were still a small team. So the domain teams didn't really also have the capacity or expertise to own their own data products. But that was already kind of in the horizon. We knew that at some point we have to hand over the data products.
Okay. Have you done that now? Like, are they owning the data product at this point, or it's still in transition?
Most of them now are doing it. So we have at the moment 2 domain teams that own their own data products. We are also working with the third one, but that's a little bit taking a little bit longer because of the whole process that they're doing at the moment with the product on their side. They still need to understand what the business needs. But the other 2 domain teams, we already handed them over. Actually, one of them we handed over by the end of August, like very recently. And that meant basically creating a set of workshops, creating a set of handover workshops to make sure that they understand everything of how to maintain these data products, what to do in different scenarios and things like that. But I mean, it wasn't truly not a big challenge as well, because at the very beginning, we were collaborating quite a lot, because also creating these data products it meant that we have to collaborate with domain teams from the very beginning to understand what kind of data product we have to create so that it actually adds value to them rather than just creating data product for the sake of it, right? So they were already involved in the process, and that meant that the handover was a little bit easier. So it wasn't completely from scratch.
Okay, very interesting. So now that you're mentioning the data product, how do you define data product? And then what type of data products you have introduced so far?
I think this was like one of the biggest questions at the very beginning, because a lot of people in the team, including myself, we had no idea what the data mesh is. We had no idea how to define data products. But then it all started again, as I mentioned, with this transition. And then we had a few workshops, we had sessions, we had brainstormings, we have talking with the domain team, also the product team, with the sales team, to understand what the business needs so that we can actually define where these data products lies, right? Like, what is this dividing factor that says this is the data product and that is another data product? But then in the end, we came up with the kind of a 3-stage data products. So we have one that is a source-aligned data products. We have another one that is aggregated data products. And then we have the end one that is the customer-facing data products. And I can also go to details of each of those. So for the source-aligned data products, this is basically the closest you can get to the raw data, but it's not necessarily raw data because it is already clean, it is already validated, it is already up to date. So we ensure that whatever we publish as the source-aligned data product, it's already, you can actually trust data, right? So it's already validated. It's already the latest data that we have. And we ensure that by creating data contracts. So we have a data contract that basically clearly defines what is our expectation of this data product. And this basically acts as the main validation point for us. But not only that, it's also more than just validation. So this data contract is kind of a main source of truth, like one important point of truth for this data product, which basically contains, of course, the validation part, but it also contains all the table schema that we are receiving from data providers, but we are also generating in the end as the source-aligned published data product. But also contact points, the processing logic, the cleaning logic, and much more, like descriptions and all of those. This basically gives everyone in the company, so not only the technical people, but also everyone else in the company, to go there, see what the data contains, understand what we are getting, what we are doing, because we also publish automatically these data contracts to a page in Confluence. So even accessing those are actually much, much easier for anyone in the company. And then moving on with the other layer, which is the aggregated data products. So these are built on top of the source-aligned data products, basically aggregating one or multiple sources but it's done to create a more of a higher level insights. So because you can imagine with the source aligned data product, as I mentioned, it's very close to raw data. So you can imagine, for example, for the one thing that we have, pharmaceutical sales. So every row is just a sale of a medication in one pharmacy, right? So that's the most insight you can get from the source align. But then the aggregated data product, you can create something like sales of MS medications that is happening yearly or quarterly or monthly, or co-purchases, like what are the other medications that are sold specifically with this medication, or even the medication adherence of patients. So you can imagine, so all of these are basically aggregated on one or multiple data products to create this kind of a specific insights to answer questions basically for the customers. And then in the end, we have customer-facing data products, which is the products that in the end customer sees in the dashboards, in the monitors that we have. They are very much attached to the widgets in a dashboard, one or multiple. And then the whole idea of this data product is to provide these actionable insights for the customers through this visualization. So then you can imagine, for example, we have, again, as I mentioned, like the adherence, right? But the adherence you can have in multiple factors. You can have for different disease, you can have for different kind of patients to create this patient journey. And then all of those would fit into different widgets in a monitor. And those would be the end kind of the end data product that is facing, that our customers are facing. But then at any stage, again, as I mentioned, we have data contracts. So each data contract is testing the previous stage so that we ensure that whatever we expect is consistent. So for example, when we create the aggregated data products from multiple raw data products, these data contracts test what we expect. And if something deviates from whatever the expectation is, whatever the agreement is, we can actually take basically stop the whole process as soon as possible. And this is also done in the end. But then you can imagine the higher level you go, you can also do kind of a more extensive test cases, right? Like at the very beginning, you do just schema testing, kind of like a very limited kind of testing. But then in the end, you can imagine you can do distribution testing, you can do anomaly testing. We are also looking into like testing even with the LLM just to get an idea of, does this make sense? Does this plot make sense? And things like that.
I'm so loving this because you are one of the rare resources that have that very, very structured data product implemented. Because, the concept of data product is relatively new. And when people talking about data product, they have something in mind as data products, but it's not necessarily as structured as you are implementing in your company. My experience is exactly like yours. So we are also dividing our data products into core, aggregated, and consumer, which is kind of same as even your definitions. And the core packages, like the core data products, are what maybe even Ramak mentioned in Data Meshwork, that it's the data product that she had in mind. So the core packages that are valuable, reusable, but they're not necessarily aggregated, or they're not necessarily consumer-facing or customer-facing. But then the customer-facing one is the most used one, is the most that people are mentioning as data product, because they really need something tangible. And then in between, those poor aggregated ones, no one even think about them. But this is very, very structured, and this is very, very useful for everyone that is listening to try to implement, and this type of categorization, because it has a lot of meaning to it, and it has a lot of product mindset attached to it, right? That like even when you're talking about the whole metadata management aspect of it that you're managing in Confluence, or any type of data discovery platform would do that, but Confluence is as good as anything, right? This is very great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I also wondering how to interact with customers or with business, with their needs, and when you want to create those data products?
Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, I think at the very beginning, our customers kind of were the internal customers, right? It was like the domain teams we assumed as our customer, because in the very beginning, where we are trying to define the whole foundation of these data products, as I mentioned, we set up regular workshops, we set up regular feedback sessions to make sure whatever we are creating can serve this internal customer first. So that they can also create insights and value from the data product, and then move on top of that, right? This collaboration also meant that creating data contract, as I mentioned, that was very much done in collaboration with domain teams. Also creating the validation, the data validation cases. So this is also so that the data that we have, some of them are easier to understand, but some of them are very medical intensive. So you really have to understand what this data is to be able to test this data. So that meant collaboration with the domain team was actually like the main point to do it, because you have to have someone to understand data and then to create all of these contracts, create all of these validations, test cases. So that was the very beginning of it, that we assumed the internal team, domain team is as a customer. But then, of course, moving forward, when the product was a little bit matured, and then we had external customers as well, then it was also kind of a mix at the beginning. So a mix of domain teams and also the data platform team at a time to interact with the end customer, to basically showcase the main product to the customer to see if it actually answers their questions or not. And this is basically how feature development works, right, in the product itself, because it is very much tied to the data products that we are providing. So whatever the customer needs to see, if there is a question or if there is something in the monitor that doesn't necessarily answer the questions, that meant that the domain team has to go back. We have to go back into data products and reevaluate things to see, okay, we created this, but it doesn't give value to the customer. They see something in the monitor, but it doesn't necessarily answer the question that they need. So that meant this was very much tied to, especially to creation of these aggregated data products, creation of these customer-facing data products. It was always kind of an interaction with the customers that we have. And it's still going on because, as I mentioned, we still have different modules in the product that we are trying to develop. And that's how it is as well. So we have a very close look with the customers to get an understanding if whatever they see makes sense, we can answer the questions or not. This again either goes in feature development, but you can even imagine in a more extreme cases, this can also go into a complete new data product, right? For example, we say the customer needs to know something about doctors that are prescribing the medications, but then we don't have that data set at the moment. So then it means that there's a data strategy team in the company that is basically responsibility is to look for other data sources. But then you can imagine that can also lead to creation of a completely new data product.
So regarding this, how do you incorporate product management into this? Like, what is the most important step that you want to do as a product manager to explore and extract those needs and create those data products? And how is it similar or different to a software product management in your view?
I think there are a lot of parts that is similar to the traditional product management. For example, like any other software, you definitely still need a clear vision. You need a stakeholders alignment, stakeholders management. You need a roadmap for feature development. So that's quite similar to the traditional product management. But I think that the main difference here is the focus on data. And this basically means the focus on data governance, the focus on quality, the focus on compliance. So these are all the things that are basically added to this product that is main focus has on the data. And I think, as I mentioned, the whole data contract creation, that was kind of the way to manage the data quality, to make sure the data quality remains high. And then these data contracts also acted as kind of an agreement between between us, the data consumers, but also between the data providers, and also you can imagine between us and the customer end. So I think one of the most important steps, again, was to make sure the data quality remains high. And that's basically why we also define the data contracts at every stage of the data product. And these contracts act as formal agreements between the data producer and consumer, outlining expectations for accuracy, for completeness, and for the structure of the data that is coming in. But I think another difference is also, again, because it very much heavily focuses on data, is regarding the life cycle. I think the life cycle is much shorter in a data product management kind of, because it very much ties to both technical requirements, but also to business needs. So as soon as we have a new data source, or as soon as we have a shift in the business goals, or we have, again, as I mentioned, questions coming from customers that they cannot answer at the moment, that on its own can change a lot of things in the development of the data product, which I think is still a little bit creates this big difference between the actual traditional product management to something like a data product management.
Great. Thank you so much. And also, in my mind, what is always very, very hard to do is defining metrics and measuring them. So how do you do those?
I think, again, as one of the key aspects was the data quality, I think one of the big metrics that we also define is a quality score. So we created kind of a combination of different logics to test between data products, and then in the end create kind of an aggregated score that is basically created from multiple categories. So we have accuracy, we have completeness, and we have timeliness. And this is basically tested throughout every single data products that we have. And then this is one of the metrics that we can basically showcase as either collaboration between us and the data provider, or collaboration internally between us and domain teams, and then measure the metrics and measure the success of a data product, or also the collaboration and whatever value we are providing to the end customer for the customer and customer-facing data products.
How do you measure a customer-facing product? Do you use like a surface level, for example, like clicks, or all of those metrics that are being gathered from a web page, or you look in the back as well to see the consumption?
One thing is we use the automated part, which is, again, user tracking through the monitors, but you also get the clicks, but you also get like the heat maps of where the customer has the most interaction throughout the monitors. So that's the automated way that we basically try to aggregate those data into some numbers to see what are the widgets that are most useful or most used for the customers. And that already gives you some kind of a score for each of these customer-facing data products, right? So that's one thing. But of course, there is also the direct feedback loop that we have from customers. So and we have regular touch points to our customers. I think it is called Coffee and Data. So we have basically data experts sitting with the customers and then talking about the values they got from the monitors, which one is more useful for them. Maybe there are things that they can change. There are things that we can adapt. So I think that's also, it's of course more kind of a manual work to do, but I think that's basically the difference between quantitative versus the qualitative, like the kind of a score that you want to have, right? I think it's always good to have a good mixture of both of the metrics and not only focus on numbers, but also focus on what you actually can get directly from the customers.
Yeah, that is very true. Coffee and data, I really like that concept. I'm going to implement it. Was there any challenges regarding defining or measuring the metrics?
I think one of the challenges that we faced at the very beginning was how to create a metrics that is comparable within all of these different data products. Because we could have, we introduce a set of validation cases for each data product, but then of course it's impossible to have the same validation cases happening for every single data product, because the underlying data is different, the schema is different, the way the data looks is different. So then we came up basically, as I already mentioned, with these kind of a more generic categories. They said, okay, let's have 3 generic categories, that is accuracy, completeness, and timeliness. And in each category, we have specialized test cases for each data product that defines what accuracy means for this data product, that defines what completeness means for this data product. And then in the end, these numbers are somehow at least more comparable than just a raw number looking into how many test cases was passed in this data product and how many test cases were failed in the other. So I think that was definitely one of the biggest challenges that we try to solve with this categorization. But I think there is also this kind of introduced also other challenges because there is kind of a balancing the technical and the business needs. Because a lot of times between different domain teams as well, they have kind of a focus on one of these categories, and the other categories might be less important for them. For example, we had the time that in one of our domain teams, the timeliness was the most important thing that they wanted to have. So they wanted to have data as soon as possible, even if the accuracy is not 100%. But of course, this is not exactly the same for other data products and other domain teams. So they have different needs. But I think ultimately the key is to have the continuous iteration. So we regularly review the metrics. We regularly review how we are using these metrics so that we make sure that we are still aligned and what the business goal and business needs is. And in the end, adjust them based on the feedback from both internal team and external customers.
Thank you. It all sounds like that it was the overall successful implementation of data mesh and managing the concept of data product and everything in your company. But is there any lesson learned from implementing data mesh or product managing a data platform that you want to share?
I think one of the most important lessons that we've learned in implementing a data mesh is the importance of starting small and iterating. So rather than trying to implement the data mesh across all domains at once, we began with a few key domains. Basically, we identified what is the most important domain at the moment that we want to deliver to the customers. And then we tackled that at the very beginning. This allowed us to test our assumptions, to learn from our mistakes, and also iterate on our approach. By starting small, we were also able to refine the process and also scale it up more effectively moving forward with the other data products. I think another valuable lesson has been the importance of the data contracts. I think I've mentioned this across the top over and over, but I think this is definitely one of the most important aspects of trying to manage these data products, because this not only provides a clear structure of how data should be handled or an automated way to test the data, but it also creates a more transparent way to agree on what this data product contains. Between, again, as I mentioned, this helps between communication between us and data provider, between us, the internal domain teams, and also between the domain teams and the end users, because you basically have everything documented in this data contract, and you can easily agree on, is this the proper contract that you want to have for this data product or not? And if everyone agrees, that basically gives you the idea of, okay, I am going on the right path with this data product.
Yeah, sounds like a very, very, straightforward direction that you are in. I'm really glad what I'm hearing. It's really makes my heart happy for some reason. Where do you see that data platform going from here?
Our vision for the future of data platform is to push kind of further towards the automation and having a self-service capabilities. So we want domain teams to be able to create and manage their own data products with minimal interventions from the centralized data platform team. So we want to basically allow them this autonomy so that they can have more innovation, they can have faster iteration, they can have easier feature developments for the data products. So basically, we are currently looking into creating some form of templates for any new data sources coming in the future. And then domain teams with limited technical expertise, they should be able to initiate, set up, and create a data product from scratch. We are also looking to kind of promote more data democratization. This basically means, again, one thing is the publishing of data contracts in Confluence. I think that's also a step going into more accessibility to data, not only for technical people, but also for everyone else in the company. But other things that we want to do is also we want to create very kind of minimal dashboards on top of each data products in each level, so that everyone in the company have access to kind of just looking at the data. What do we have? What this data product is, so that they also understand what is the data that basically is the underlying thing for the whole product of the company.
Very interesting. Out of curiosity, have you started on the self-serve journey or not yet?
To some extent. So we have automation. We've done a lot for a lot of data products. Another part that we've done, for example, one thing that we kind of shifted to a more self-service was, so the way that everything works in our way is we have different environments in our cloud provider, and the data usually falls in the stage environment, which basically we also have a stage monitor on top of this data. But previously, moving this data to production was something that a technical person would do. So you would go there, you would basically move the validated files into another project, into the prod project, and then re-ingest everything. But that's something that we have done. And now we created a kind of a more of a user-friendly interface that anyone within the team can go there, select the data product, select the latest data delivery, and then just say push to production. And then everything else, again, on production is automated, and everything will basically you are pushing data directly to a production product that customer can see. So we are doing bits and pieces, but it's much more. So we have to make sure that it's not only existing data products, as I mentioned, but also upcoming data products or other data sources that are coming in. So it's a little bit, it has to be easier for introduction of new data products as well.
I really like the concept of self-serve data platforms or, self-serve capabilities for data, because it matches a lot with product mindset and product management. And you can easily define, for example, personas and user groups and, do all those user testing, because it's kind of tangible, but at the same time, you exactly know what type of need which each persona or each data user group may have. So it's aligned a lot more with traditional product management than the other part of it. So it's a very interesting journey overall. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I hope the listeners are really benefiting from what you're sharing and contacting you if they have really questions or, needs to get your point of view on anything. Any final word of wisdom, any suggestions, or any recommendation for who may be on the same boat?
So I think the big thing that has to happen in companies is the shift of the mindset of the way you look at the data and how you use the data in the company, because you have to start to think about the data that you have as a product. You have to start to get this data closer to the product, closer to the end customer, closer to the value that you want to add. And in the end, if you have something like that, I think the shift to the data mesh is an inevitable approach, inevitable way that you have to go. So I think that's definitely one important aspect that has to happen within the companies, within the departments, to decide to move on to the data mesh world.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. It was a very great episode. I hope everyone enjoyed as well as I did. People can find you on LinkedIn. We will link your LinkedIn profile to the episode. And thanks again for joining.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I was part of this. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening. Hopefully you got some great actionable insights out of this episode. We're so excited to dig deeper into data product management and its many facets. If you want to engage more with the show, you can follow us on LinkedIn and check out Soda's website at soda.io for more related content around product management in data. And if you are a practitioner bringing product management practices to data and want to potentially be a guest, please check the show notes for a link to apply. As always, we strongly encourage people from underrepresented groups in tech to apply. Much as I'm a handsome devil, we don't want all our guests only looking like me. So again, let's get excited for more digging into data product management in action.